Hello YouTubers, this is Music Store here, and this is my review number 2 in the James Bond series, featuring the second James Bond film, From Russia with Love. We're filmed in between April 1st, 1963 and August 1963, directed by Terence Young, stars Sean Connery, Daniela Bianchi as Tatiana Romanova, Lot Lenya plays Rosa Klebb, Robert Shaw plays Grant, Funes Grayson plays Sylvia, Bernard Lee plays M, Kronstein, I'm not sure, plays him off the top of my head, and it is the first James Bond film to feature Q, who would go from this film in 1963 all the way to The World Is Not Enough in 1999. Now, some things about this movie is this is coming off the huge worldwide success of Dr. No, the first James Bond film, which I think if that movie would have flopped, you would have never seen another James Bond. So, this one has a good plot. James Bond is sent to Istanbul, Turkey, because this lady wants to defect. Tatiana Romanova wants to defect to Britain and bring a Lecter decoding machine, which is actually a trap originally, and he encounters Spectre. Now, and he tries to get back to England with the Lecter decoding machine. That's the plot to this whole film. Now let's get to some scenes. You had a great cat and mouse opening where you had Robert Shaw constantly playing his cat and mouse with this figure that we thought was James Bond at the beginning. And during the thing you hear stuff like twigs breaking, them actually trying to kill each other. It's sort of like a fight to the death, and Robert Shaw gets behind him with a little wire thing that you seen back during the Cold War days and strangles him to death. The wire. You get the next vid, which is a Ion or Eon vid, which is typical. Gets the From Russia with Love instrumental piece at the beginning, which is pretty good. Then you get stuff like the chess match, which was a pretty good scene in this film. It sort of started off showing Constantine as a great strategist. And then the next scene, which was pretty good. It was a scene that introduced Rosa Klebb as a villain in the film. It introduced, finally, Ernest Blofeld, which would later become a great character in this film. Actually, in this movie, it says question mark by Ernest Blofeld. But I actually, through listening to the voice and listening to the people in this movie, I actually think it might actually be Sean Connery in this film playing Ernest Blofeld. But it was pretty good. It showed this scene with these Siamese fighting fish and all that, and how he's explaining how they'll fight each other and all that. But this time, he has one that's off to the side waiting for the other two to kill each other, and then, or to one of them to kill each other, and then he'd come in and kill the one that killed the other fish, and it's pretty good. This is where they sort of explain their plot about the Lecter decoding machine and to get revenge for the death of Dr. No, so it is sort of tied back into the first movie in a way, and it really worked pretty good. Even though the acting, some would say, for 1963 is like, some people don't like the acting, but I didn't mind it. It really showed that they were intelligent. This is something I'll say about James Bond villains, is they're always intelligent and all that. Then you get to the scene that introduced Grant into the movie quite a bit. Like, I'm not sure his real name in the movie, but when he meets James Bond, he calls himself Grant and all that and everything. It works well. This worked pretty well. It was the scene where Grant's on this sort of private destination and all this, and it shows this girl taking her clothes off, starts massaging them and all this stuff, and Rosa Klebb came there, and the one thing I will take from the scene that was so awesome is she took out Brass Knucks, punched him in the gut, and he didn't even flinch. Like, that's badass. That's like, wow. If Brass Knucks to the guts won't make you flinch or drop to your knees and cry for mommy, I don't know what will. That's just a great scene. I love it. Then you get to the Tatiana interviewed by Klebb scene where she goes through the whole thing, and it was pretty self-explanatory through watching it. If you watch the movie, you'll get a lot more of these things. Then you get the introduction to Bond, which was pretty good, because it showed this girl there on the beach, James Bond with a girl in a bikini, and I really liked it for the fact that they're on there, and he gets a phone call, or he has to call the office and all that, and she's like, well, I'm hungry, you promised we'd eat. Phones the office and all that, and says it's an old case, and she comes up and like, I'm an old case now, and everything, and he starts getting into her, he smacks her hand or whatever during the scene, and it's like, now if James Bond ever hit a woman now, you'd have all these women's rights activists on his ass about stuff like women or assaulting women or something. Well, back then it was something used in there, but so he comes back to the office, he meets up with them, and this is where you get the introduction to Q, and which was really good. I thought the way they brought Q in, he sort of looked old even in this, but what it showed off really well is his knowledge in like the gadgets he started to come up with. Like this one, you had stuff like knives in it, you had a gun, you had ammunition, you had gold sovereigns, and yes, if you don't turn the things right, you have a tear gas cartridge. Then you get, for a while, he goes to Istanbul, walks around, does that whole shit and all that, and then you get the explosion scene in the Turkish espionage thing, and there's a branch in Turkey where the ball gets blown up and all that. Some of these scenes I won't go as much in depth about. Just watch the movie. Gypsy scene. One thing about this is it shows two women fighting, first off. It shows a belly dancer and all that, which is three women, which obviously, I guess, makes James Bond a horn dog, but nothing ever comes of it. And then the Bulgarians crash the party, you see a lot of shooting, bang bang, bang bang, fighting, all this, and then one guy jumps off the roof, gets behind James Bond, doesn't see him, and Grant shoots him. Shoots the guy who's about to kill James Bond. Which, if you're thinking Spectre, it's like, well, wouldn't Spectre want that? But no. Later in the movie, you find out why. Sorry if I sound off today, it's just I'm coming off of a cold and haven't been able to do any of these movies. Was going to do these movies on the weekend, but just through cold, I sound off, so. Then you get the sniper scene where they find out the guy who's led the attack, which you already knew about, Grigorenko or whatever, and he comes out the window after some cops bring his buzzer, comes out the window. James Bond, NBC friend, shoots the guy with the sniper rifle and all that. Not much. Then James Bond goes home and finds Tatiana naked in his bed. James Bond, the constant horn dog, you always find a naked woman in his bed. If through a James Bond movie, it just happens. Which I'm shocked and all that you didn't find more of Honey Wilder in James Bond's bed in the first movie. Then the next scene that really matters is the bank explosion scene where they get the Lecter. And like just the blow up, bam, like there was more explosions I think in this movie than there was in the first movie. You could even maybe say this has more explosions in it than even Goldfinger, if I remember correctly. But it was good. Then you get the scene where they're on their train, and this is the next important scene. I know I skipped over quite a bit of the movie. Grant meets James Bond and tries to befriend him, and all of this, like, they're on the train, everything's going well, okay, and then they meet Grant, and he says he's a agent working, all that. James Bond believes him, and he befriends him, he brings him to dinner with Tatiana. Grant drugs Tatiana during that. Bond sees it, but doesn't say anything. And then they get to the part where they get back to the room, and he knocks James Bond down and all that. And James Bond starts asking questions like Smersh and all this, which was Russian special operatives, I believe, during the Cold War or whatever. And then he finds out during the thing that Spectre has been playing both sides. Well, especially James Bond and all that and everything. And then they start fighting in this epic James Bond fighting scene, which I still think is probably one of James Bond's best fights. Well, at least more realistic than some of James Bond's fights. Because I'm sorry to say it, I thought a lot of Roger Moore's fighting in James Bond was... didn't really care for it too much, but it was good for what it was. And like Grant at the beginning, how he killed that guy with his little wire, cutting off his hair and all that, is what happens is James Bond, during the middle of this fight, which I forgot to mention, he opened the case with tear gas and all that. And James Bond pulls a knife out of the case, stabs him in the arm, gets behind him, grabs the thing, cuts his hair off, kills him. Then you get the helicopter scene where they get off the train, they get in this truck, he beats up or whatever the two other guys, kills or kidnaps one, has him drive him during the night, and then it shows this helicopter coming across, dropping grenades, trying to stop the truck. Before it gets to where it has to go, James Bond gets out, grenade still dropping, hides behind some rocks, and with a rifle or something, I'm not sure if it was a sniper rifle or just a normal rifle, came out, and guy was about to drop a grenade. James Bond shoots him, drops the grenade in there, and boom, place goes up. Which then cuts to a scene with Spectre sort of seeing failure, and Blofeld's not happy, and he's saying, what's going wrong, and who am I gonna kill? And he says, failure's not an option. Number 3, which is Kleb. So you're thinking, oh my god, he's gonna kill Kleb. Kleb's gonna get it, Kleb's gonna get it, Kleb's gonna get it. And then out of nowhere, bam! Sticks Kromstein with a sort of blade, I guess it was poison tip. And it took him 12 seconds to die, but I love this one part in the scene where Blofeld's like, it took him 12 seconds to die. Sooner or later, we're gonna have to find something that's a whole lot quicker. A more powerful venom. And then you get the part where the barrels are being chased and all that, and shooting the barrels on the back of James Bond's boat, and Tatiana and all that. And ingenious thing, James Bond just decides, well, let's knock them off, they're leaking fuel, fire flare at them, blow it up sky high, and this huge scene that was like, wow. Even for 1963, I thought that was pretty impressive. Which leads to the final scene in Venice. They get their little boat to Venice, which has Kleb stick up James Bond. Tatiana then, after this, like, Rosa Kleb gave her the Lecter thing and tells her to get out of the room. Tatiana helps Bond and Kleb get in a fight. Kleb's weapon is a poison-tipped blade in her shoe, which she's trying to constantly kick James Bond, which is like, oh my god. And then through the scene, you're seeing the struggle where Bond's holding her back with a chair, pinning her up against the wall. And Tatiana's like, who do I shoot? Who do I shoot? And bam, she shoots Rosa Clem. And then, which shows, oh my god, James Bond in Venice on a boat with Tatiana. And they're talking, and then all of a sudden at the end of the movie they're making out, so it's obvious it's a James Bond film. Which, now for some facts about this movie that I'm not sure if I mentioned this at the beginning. This movie made more than Dr. No. It made $78 million worldwide, which I'm still not sure if that's like 1963 or that's over all the years it's been out, but it's still made, I think, just about $20 million or so more than Dr. No, which is quite surprising for a film. Now, what are my grade for this movie? Would I give it? I'd give it an A-. To me, here's some pros to the movie. It did introduce Spectre as a main villain, which led up for the next few Bond films, which was good. It had a story behind it. It introduced Q as a character, which through the years would be a mainstay. It introduced Blofeld, who would be played by countless other guys until I believe Diamonds Are Forever was the only time, I think, where they came out with the second, where Blofeld was played by somebody. Other things about this, it was good. Like, I thought Terrence Young did a pretty good job directing it. I thought it flowed very well. Some cons, there was some scenes where it was like, well, you kind of felt like it sort of dragged in scenes, or there were scenes where it like, where does this completely fit into the story? And oh yes, and I think I did forget to mention it was produced by Albert Broccoli and Harry Saltzman and everything, but I don't know, it just seemed Bond. This Bond was good. It led up. It sort of kept the momentum going into Goldfinger, which was the next James Bond film. Which, to me, this film really is underrated, because it's one of those Bond films where you either like it or you don't. There's never a middle ground for this film. I find talking to people with it, they either like it or they hate it. There's never that middle and everything. But would I say it's the worst James Bond film? No. Would I say it's the greatest James Bond film? Maybe. But it was a solid film, and that's what I'll give it as rating, is an A-. Do I think it was better than Dr. No? Yes. And that's all you can ask for. Like, did it meet your expectations? Yes. But yes, so that is my review of James Bond's 1963 epic masterpiece. Well, not really epic masterpiece, but his second film, From Russia with Love. This is Music Soar here, signing off. Peace.